Right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the How to Lead a Salesforce Project Masterclass. I'm delighted that you're all here. Thank you very much for joining, and it's great to see the geographical spread that we've got across the world. So please do feel free to ask questions as we go, and I'll pause at different intervals. I'm going to be covering different segments of information. So I'm going to start off about risks, really, because one of the reasons that you might all be here, or why this topic is so important, is there are lots of things that can go wrong on projects, but typically there are, I would say, I think I've listed 20 that are the common most ones, and it's typically because a professional approach hasn't been taken to that project. And when I say professional approach, I mean that the disciplines of business analysis, agile project management, and change management haven't been applied. And pretty much that's it, really. It's those, if you can apply those disciplines and understand what they are and apply them professionally as a Salesforce professional, you will mitigate the risks of your project. But what's also really important is that you can sit down with a client up front, or your team, because if you're working externally as a consultant, it would be a client. If you're working internally with a team, it would be, your stakeholders internally. You want to sit down with a risk mitigation strategy and talk through it and just go, right, these are all the things that could go wrong, or you might not want to phrase it quite like that, but these are all the things we need to be aware of, and how we're going to make sure that actually we tick all the boxes here and mitigate them as much as possible. So I'm going to start with that topic today, and just to kind of give a background to my career path, I suppose, to validate what I'm telling you and teaching you on today's masterclass, is I started out as an accidental admin back in 2010. I was running a non-profit at the time, and so I designed and built my own system for that non-profit, and it helped my organisation scale from 4 to 40 staff in a year, and went from 100k to over 1.4 million in a year, because we had Salesforce, because it allowed us to manage and monitor all of the delivery that we were doing, and we could report to funders, and it helped us win more contracts. And so the power of Salesforce really blew me away, and I was really inspired to then say, actually, I really want to help other nonprofits feel the power of a Salesforce system and what it could do for their nonprofit to help them grow, to scale, to increase their impact, to increase their volunteers, to increase their fundraising. I was like a woman on a mission. I was like, oh my gosh, this has been so amazing for us. So I want to help other nonprofits do the same. And so I trained at the time when I was running and managing the system as an accidental admin, as well as being the CEO. I did the admin course, the advanced admin course, but also a consultancy skills course, which was a week-long Salesforce course, which they no longer deliver. And that course was fantastic. It gave me all the principles of actually how to be a consultant. What it didn't do was give me the practical skills of business analyst, change management, and agile project management. They were additional skill sets, but it helped me understand how to design a system rather than just build a system. And it's really unfortunate they don't do that course now, but it was a fantastic course. So I now teach a lot of that disciplines that they taught me as part of our consultancy skills course at Supermums. So I worked as a freelance Salesforce consultant for, I think it was 3 years before I grew a consultancy around me. And what I quickly learned working as a freelance consultant is that I didn't really know how to consult properly and how to follow a professional sort of path. And I didn't know how to document things. I didn't know how to manage different stakeholder personalities and kind of engage them and enthuse them and empower them through that technology journey. I talk about the 3 E's quite a lot. And I also realized I didn't know how to project manage something professionally, because particularly when there was lots and lots of requirements that came out, but they didn't have the budget to do everything, I was like, oh my gosh, well, how do I deal with this? So that then led me down the path of understanding what all this additional training and skill development that I needed was around business analysis, change management, and agile project management. And I invested over £11,000 in my additional training in all of those areas. Now, what I realized when I did those courses, that they were fantastic, but they were very generalist. It wasn't specifically tailored to Salesforce or technology. And there was a lot of information there. So when I was then starting to apply what I'd learned in practice in a Salesforce environment, I quickly then had to produce all my own templates and kind of go, right, if I'm doing a Sales Cloud implementation, what is it that I need to ask? You know, what are all those questions and how do I document this? And so I started to translate what I'd learned and put it into my own formula and strategy. And then when I grew a consultancy, we grew it to a team of 20. We were all working with non-profits. I had to systemize and do a professional approach to how we delivered to consultants, because I realized that if I hired a team and they all went out and did their own individual thing, we didn't necessarily cover everything. And so I created a lot of these templates whilst running a consultancy, and we delivered over 700 projects with 350 non-profits during the time I was running that consultancy. And I have to say, it was based on, if something was not done to align to those disciplines, that's when a project would quite often go wrong. It wasn't anything else. There wasn't, you know, there was a science behind it. If you followed the protocols, if you like, and did X, Y, Z in the way that you should do through business analysis, agile project management, change management, then your project will seemingly go, you know, and achieve success on it. But if you don't document things properly, if you don't prioritize things with the client, if you don't set up a clear communication strategy, that's when the project will go wrong, which is why I love teaching this stuff, because if I can save you that pain of going through something that goes wrong because you just didn't have the foresight or knowledge, it's quite often you don't know what you don't know. So at the end of today's session, I'd love you to kind of have that clarity about, now I get it. Now I know what I need to know. And you can then take that decision about when and how you go about learning it. And obviously you're going to learn things off the session tonight as well. So I love now teaching and educating people. I set up Supermums in 2016. And we have been running a Salesforce admin course, our consultancy skills course, and our marketing cloud course. So we deliver those virtually to people all over the world. As you can see, we've got quite an international mix here. And we're nearly up 1,000 trainees. I think we're about 980. So we should hit 1,000 trainees that have gone through our program by the end of this month, which is hugely exciting. And I love working with my consultancy skills trainees and helping them up level. There's various reasons why they do it, and I'll be interested in doing a little poll with you in a minute to see where you're all at. But the majority of them, you know, want to do it because they want to increase their confidence. They want to go from being an admin to a consultant. They want to increase their salary. They want to land their first job, and they feel that these skills, you know, are essential skills to kind of landing that first role as a solo admin or a consultant. And I've certainly seen all that success of people that have done our course. They have landed those fantastic jobs. And certainly learning sort of business analysis, change management and agile project management skills and putting that on the CV has got them head and shoulders above it, and also negotiated a higher salary. So it's great to see all the success stories that come out of the program. But if you can take away, you know, benefits from today and you don't want to do the course, that's absolutely fine too. You know, I just enjoy really helping people and giving that insight to those of you. So I'll do a little poll with you if that's okay, because I'd just love to know your motivation for being here. So I'm going to launch that poll first. So do you want to just tell me, I've got a spello in there, excuse the spello. If you want to let me know what your motivation is to be here, that would be fantastic. So I know engage where you're all at. I'll just launch that poll. Thanks for the question, Samantha. I will answer that. So Samantha says, what are the top challenges you've encountered as a project manager using Salesforce, and how did you overcome them? So that's going to be my risk assessment first. That's up first. We'll cover about the risks and things where they go wrong. I hold all the scars, either through myself learning early on or through one of my consultants not quite getting it right first time, which we all learn and make those mistakes. So I've seen everything. Great. So I think everybody, we've got to increase skills and confidence is top of the list, to increase your salary, and to help you land your first job, so that's 5 of you, and to increase skills and confidence is 8 out of 9. And then we've got a couple around to increase salary and to help get a promotion. Awesome. Okay. So second question is what's your current position? Maybe I know that now because of what those questions are. So if you want to just let me know. Let's see where you're at. So hi to somebody that's just joined. We're just doing a quick poll so I can see where you're all at the moment. Starting out as now I'm working as an admin, okay, working as a consultant, and 4 other. What are the others? Oh, I'm intrigued. Do you want to put that in the chat? What have I missed? It'd be great to know. Great, thanks for answering that. We'll see what the others are as we go through. Currently in university, okay, no worries. Great. Okay. All right. So let's crack on with some content. So I've done the intro to me, I've talked about the agenda. And what I'm going to do is talk about the risks and those problems. The risks I'll turn on the head, you know, these are where I've seen things happen. So let me, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. I'll bring up the next slide deck. I have a few little slide decks. So Jana, you're looking for CRM project management. Okay. Right, to mitigate risks one. So let's. And this. So I'm going to talk about 10 risks to avoid on your Salesforce project. I actually have 20 on my mitigation checklist, but there's some that I've highlighted that are more important than others. That I think, you know, is either down to our skill set or not applying something properly, and how to manage the project. So a lot of these things are things that you can certainly avoid by just being really mindful about how you deliver on a project. So have these 10 things on your wall as a checklist, and as they talk through your team or your clients with them. So the first thing is poor business analysis. And I think there's 2 sides to this. One is that you need the team that you're working with to really understand the importance of business analysis. Most Salesforce projects will fail if business analysis is not done properly and people don't spend the time doing it. So there has to be clear buy-in, there has to be investment in it, and there has to be a very considered approach to how you elicit those requirements. So it's tailored to the culture of the organization, it's gathering the right information, and then all of that is documented really clearly as well. So, you know, it can be on you. I've certainly had some people where, you know, documentation isn't done, and then that leaves the client confused, it leaves you confused as a team, like, oh gosh, what do we need to do, what we're prioritizing, what, nothing worse than leaving an organization with no documentation that says, you know, the why, what, how, and when of what's been done. So you have to make sure there's time and budget aligned for that, and not get distracted with, I'm going to focus all the budget on build. And so I'm going to talk about budget because it's really important that you talk to the team or the customer that you're working with and make them aware of all the different facets of doing the system implementation, and that budget isn't just focused on, I'm just going to build some workflows and it's just on that. So you need to make sure that there's enough time to do really good business analysis, and guaranteed if there isn't sufficient business analysis, it's where the #1 risk will go wrong. So all I say is don't be lazy, like do document everything, make sure that there's time and budget for that, and sort of package that all in. Number 2 is lack of executive sponsorship and poor executive sponsorship. Now that might be because as the Salesforce professional, you haven't actually educated the executive sponsor on what their roles and responsibilities are. So I talk about that in our change management course. I talk about, you know, what, you know, how you can communicate and tell them this is what you need to do as the exec sponsor, because they've probably never done this before. They don't know what's expected of them. They're probably, their mindset is probably like, oh, I just need to give money and sit in a few meetings, where actually they have a really instrumental role in being the change management agent and really sort of navigating and communicating to everybody in the organization about why and what is happening with the Salesforce system. So it will go wrong if the executive sponsor isn't clear on their roles and responsibilities. They don't own that role, they're not communicating very well, and there's no accountability. So as a Salesforce professional, you need to upward manage, and you need to make sure that they're really clear on what their roles are. Don't assume it anywhere else, particularly if you're working as a solo admin, because nobody in that organization might even know what you do, and you're kind of left to be the one holding the fort and sort of holding the authority. And you'll need to navigate and set up a center of excellence and make sure the exec sponsor's there, make sure there's champions, and kind of really hold that sort of level of responsibility. So it's important that you kind of know what your role is there. The third reason, which fits into both of those things, is having an unclear business case. The why is the system here. So it's important, again, as a Salesforce professional, that you really nail this down with the customer. They might really not know what their KPIs are, their key performance indicators, what a return on investment is. So you need to work with them on that. And so what I would do as a Salesforce professional is give them example return on investment indicators, which might look at efficiency, income, revenue, etc. I think I had 5 different brackets, and I gave them a selection of 20 different indicators, which I get them to look at and go, right, which of these is going to measure the success of this project? How are we going to measure the success 6 months or a year from now? So again, you need to take, I liken it to a management consultant role really. As a Salesforce professional, you have to have that management hat on them, and you have to give them quite often the information to help inform an answer. So you've got an issue if there's no clear pain points, there's no clear measure of success, there's no accountability, and again, if there isn't any of those things, there's going to be a lack of investment in it. And one of the projects that I talk about on the Consultancy Skills course is an implementation that I was brought into after they'd spent £2 million on a Salesforce implementation. And they'd had this Salesforce project, they'd been spending this money on it, but there was a new executive sponsor, and he was like, I don't understand where all this money's gone or what the value is that we're getting out of this system. And it was very evident there was no clear business case at the outset, and nobody was measuring the performance of this, and they were ready to sort of jack it all in and get rid of Salesforce. And obviously Salesforce weren't very happy because it's quite a big client for them. So I had to go in and interview everybody and determine what that business case was, build that new business case for them, understand what the value was that they thought they got from it or what they'd like to get from it, and also look at what the system, why it wasn't being adopted, what those barriers were. And again, I talk about the logical levels. There's typically on the logical levels, I talk about 6 different areas of risk of why a system isn't being adopted. It's really fascinating. And one of the reasons is there's no clear business case. Nobody really knows the value of the CRM. Nobody then aligns to it or uses it because nobody's sort of telling them they should use it. And what was also interesting about this big project is that none of the management team looked at Salesforce or used it for anything. When there had been new management that had come in, and none of them had ever been trained on Salesforce. They didn't know what it could do. They didn't appreciate reports or dashboards. And so management weren't bought into the system, hence why there was no business case. So it's really important that you get management on board and that you get an exec sponsor on board, and the managers are trained in knowing, how to use the system, that it's their big brother, that they can use it for their performance monitoring. So lots to unpack there, and there's quite a lot to unpack here, but if you haven't got a clear business case, you've got a problem. Number 4 is about poor communication. That's another risk. So I had one of our trainees on our consultancy skills course say to me, I feel really bad to keep going back and asking questions all the time. Like, I'm trying to build it and design it, but I can't ask all my questions. I'm like, okay, so have you got regular stand-ups set in with the client where actually you'll speak to them maybe every day for 10 minutes or every 2 or 3 days, and you have a way of asking questions, whether it's through Slack or through another communication tool, and you're allowed to do that? Because if you don't set out a really clear communication agenda with a way of communicating, and everybody knows what their roles and responsibilities are, you're going to have poor communication. which means tasks and deadlines will get delayed. And that's something that we found very much actually, we had to take steps to improve this as a consultancy, because we'd send an email, we'd send a follow-up agenda with an email to say, right, in this meeting, we've agreed X, Y, Z, and these things need to get to us by this date. And that would be in an email and an agenda, but to be honest, it didn't get really paid attention to, which meant that we'd then get stuff late back, which would delay the build, and then it mess everything up. And so we moved to having a system where there was tasks that were assigned to people, that we'd get automated reminders, and use communication tools and project management systems that really sort of glued all the different stakeholders together. So it's really important to have really good communication, otherwise it's another big risk. Number 5 is scope creep. So what will happen is when you go through the business analysis session, you are in a position where you're educating them about what Salesforce can do as much as you are about understanding what their business requirements are. And you're going to get them excited, because you'll talk through scenarios, you'll talk through technology options, and like, oh my God, I didn't know that could happen. And all of a sudden you've got this amazing wish list of like 100 things. And you're thinking, well, this is exciting, but actually their budget's only going to do 70 of these things. Oh no, what do I do? So that's what led me to learn about agile project management, because I was like, well, gosh, how do I prioritize all these things with the client in a really professional way? Because quite often they're like, well, we need everything. What do you mean we can't have everything? And then you're in that conflict situation with them. So the best approach is to educate and train the client in agile project management. DSDM is your best methodology for managing projects within time and budget. And so we teach the DSDM methodology, and that allows you to then prioritize things using Moscow prioritization with the client. And because you've done the professional training, you can hold that in a professional stance with them. So when a client says, oh, what do you mean we're not going to get everything? Well, no, we need to prioritize everything. You've trained them on agile project management. They understand it, and they accept that they're not going to get their 100 things on that wish list. And they know that because they're aligning with a globally recognized project management tool. So for those of you that want to, if people really struggle with a position where you're like, oh my gosh, well, I really want to deliver everything for clients, I want to make them happy. Like, if you're that kind of person that is a people pleaser, that feels bad that you can't do everything, then having that professional methodology that allows you to prioritize things and keep that scope within the time and budget, agile project management is going to be your best friend, basically, to kind of get everything sorted. Number 6, risk, is the culture of the organization. So if you have to tailor your approach to projects. So we talk about 4 different cultures in the change management course, and I will talk about 2 as an example. So you can have machine type organizations where you've got a very top-down management approach, and that's where the CEO and the management team are deciding everything, and they're doing the business analysis, and everybody else then gets told how to use the system. So your elicitation approach for that type of organization, how you gather requirements, has to be very different to what might be a flux and transformation organization and culture, sorry. So with a flux and transformation culture, it's more political. It's about every sort of different users, the front end users having a say. Now, with that, you can have lots of people putting their thoughts into the process, but somebody's got to make the final decision on the budget in time. So that has its pros and cons too. And with that, you might take different approaches to gathering requirements. You might do surveys, you might do workshops, you might do more shadowing. So you've got to be really aligned and tailor your approach to that culture of that organization. Some will be more carrots and stick, some will be more of a stick approach, some will be more of a carrot approach. And so you've got 4 different cultures, and each one you need to look at how you motivate people. Because obviously, if you take an organization that's a machine organization where the management team are saying it like it has to be, you've got to think, well, okay, how am I then going to motivate people and enthuse and engage them to engage in the whole Salesforce new system? You've got to think about motivational strategies. And again, we talk a lot about that in the change management course, around You know, how do we do gamification? Do we offer incentives? Do we offer you know, pay increases? And lots of different things you need to be thinking about. And there's 4 different ways you can motivate people based on those different cultures. So if you get the approach wrong for the culture of the organization, it can go wrong. That's another massive risk. You know, so you've got to be very in tune with how does this play out, rather than go in with your approach that's the one that you always do. So being mindful of the culture. With that comes the history of the CRM adoption. So if you are walking into an organization where they've had Salesforce before, you need to know why it's not been adopted. You need to understand, you know, the business rationale for having it in the first place. You need to understand the barriers for adoption, and you can use the logical levels methodology that I talk about. It's also on my YouTube channel, actually, that one, so you can have a look for that one. And I talk about, you know, these are 6 areas of reasons why systems often not adopted. And so you need to understand that to then figure it out and be able to make that project a success going forward and revitalize it, if you like. And also I talk about doing a health check. Like when you adopt a CRM system, you need to make sure there's enough budget to do a proper health check. And we give a free health check download on our website. So that's something else that I talk about and cover. And so it's a template that I created from doing that health check on that organization that spent £2 million. We had done health checks before, but nothing that formal, whereas this was obviously a really important one, and I wanted to make sure that we did a very coherent job. So designed a very robust template around how to do a health check in an organization. So definitely you know, check that out on the website. I'll share the download link in the follow-up email. Number 8 is around having a poor training strategy. So if you don't deliver training in a really robust way, that's another risk to the project. So I talk about the 4 different learning styles and making sure that you deliver, you know, what a Rolls-Royce training strategy could look like. I'm not sure if you had Rolls-Royce in the USA, but imagine like a really posh car. And you think about, right, you know, if you were delivering that really high-end gold standard training strategy, it would make sure it covered visual, kinesthetic, audio and audio digital learning styles. And with that, you've got then all your bases covered to make sure that people really understand it. If you deliver something like the bronze training strategy that maybe only covers one of those things, it may or may not be suffice, but what you need to do is measure the user adoption to know whether it's being successful. Because at the end of the day, if you're training people to use a system, you're training them with a view that they're going to use it in the way that you think. So understanding user adoption KPIs and measuring that will be really important, and discussing that with the client. Because there's nothing worse, and I say this because I've seen it, you know, there's nothing worse than walking out of an organization and 2 months later nobody's using it. Like, you know, everybody feels upset, right? You know, you want to walk in and make everybody happier when you implement Salesforce. That's what I've always said to my clients, like, I'm here to make you happier. So there's nothing worse than walking out and hearing that they've never adopted it. And that's because the training perhaps didn't have the right amount of budget, the training wasn't delivered in the right way. It might be that the organization had other stuff going on and they just didn't make the time for it as well. So again, that's a risk. But that's why you have to work with the client to go, right, how do we make this land, you know, and make sure that it is adopted and supported. So number 9 is internal resourcing. So you want to make sure, this might be you if you're the Salesforce admin, obviously, but you want to make sure that there is an internal Salesforce admin in the end customer, but also that Salesforce admin is aware of the 4 roles and the 40 tasks. Again, that's another free download that I provide. I created this 40 tasks for Salesforce admin, where you've got a set number of tasks that you'll do on a weekly basis, or a daily basis, weekly, and a quarterly basis, and a monthly basis. So you've kind of got your task list of all the things you need to be proactive around, as well as obviously being reactive to, oh, I need my password resetting. You know, there's quite a lot of proactive tasks that a Salesforce admin needs to do. So making sure that somebody is set up internally, that they know what their responsibilities are, that documentation is maintained and kept, and there is some sort of support desk that tracks all the deliverables. That was the other big issue with that project that I did the evaluation on of the £2 million is that things hadn't been documented properly. So no one really knew where £2 million worth had been spent. And it's just as important to track all your work and your deliverables as an internal Salesforce professional as much as it is an external. You must always treat yourself as a Salesforce consultant, whether you're employed internally or whether you're external and employed in that capacity, because you need to justify your role. You need to measure the return on investment. And that's how you tell your trailblazer story in terms of the transformation that you've made for that organization. So if somebody wants you to implement Sales Cloud, you can say to them, okay, this is the amount of time that it's taken, this is what the results have been, and this is the benefits that it's had. So not having the right internal resource in place is a risk for a project. And then finally is having no risk mitigation strategy, right? So you want to have a risk mitigation strategy. I provide one as part of the Consultancy Skills course where we go through the 20 odd risks, of which I've obviously been through some today. But you want to make sure you're aligned with your client on risk mitigation and that they are, on board with it and they understand it. Because again, if you go in blind and you don't educate them on it, they don't know what's a risk or not. They don't know what to have in place. And so it's very important as a Salesforce professional that you share and discuss these things as part of the project planning process. And so they're really clear on, okay, these are all the things that we need to have in place to make this project a success. So that's the 10 areas around risk mitigation. Let me see, I've got a couple of questions here. So Leanne, you said, I completely agree. I think that training and helping to eliminate business cases will be a strength of mine as an admin. Cool, that's good. As an end user, so you've seen those pain points from the other end. Any other questions before I move on to the next topic? We've got quite a bit to get through. I like talking too much on these things. I might have to go a little bit quicker on those other areas. Right, I will stop sharing, bring up these questions, let me know. So let's have a look at the project life cycle with how to estimate time and budget. So we looked at risk. Now, one of the things that I mentioned on risk is that you need to make sure you've got enough budget to manage all those different facets of a program. And you want to avoid where, budget is just spent on the build, because you really need budget wrapped around and needs all these different areas I'm going to talk about. So one of the first things you want to discuss with the client is whether they want to manage it in an agile or waterfall way. They might go, I don't know, you tell me what that means. So you will need to be in a position where you're explaining to the client or your team, again, this is just as important internally as it is externally, is which methodology you're going to use and how are you going to manage it. So you want to be clear on agile versus waterfall. You then want to work out how many projects there are. So if I was working with a fundraising team in the nonprofit, I would say, okay, that is more than one project quite often, because the fundraising team might have a grant manager, it might have somebody who manages all their donations, they might have a community fundraiser, they might have somebody that does an online shop, and all of a sudden I've got 4 mini projects where I've got to do 4 business analysis workshops, 4 builds, 4 training, and I've got to do that project lifecycle for those 4 different areas. And so it's very important to know, just within fundraising, all those different facets, because what they become is like mini projects that all have this life cycle that I'm going to go through. So with your budget, you have to think about onboarding a customer, and I have a checklist for onboarding as well, like all the things that you need to set them up on. You have to have budget for design, build, user testing, training, offboarding, and project management. And so it's not cheap doing a Salesforce project. And actually, if you try and do it cheaply, that's quite often where it will go wrong as well, because things will get missed. So I'm going to talk through all these different things that you need to think about. So with onboarding, your task will be project planning, communicating the process with the customer, preparation support, and acquiring licenses, And there's some more things there as well. Again, I sort of had a checklist around 10 different things that we do with a customer around that. But that needs to be included in your time and budget. Now, if you're employed, it's not as much of a problem. But obviously, if you're in a position where you're estimating time and effort and you're having to charge people, then you want to make sure that all that's included. Then you've got your design time. So in design, you've got to do the BA preparation. So you've got to prepare for a workshop. You will probably want to send out BA questionnaires. So I prepared a lot of these BA questionnaires for our consultancy skills course. So you would have a BA questionnaire is like a CM. You've got a CRM strategy questionnaire, which is, why do they want the CRM? What do they expect to get out of it? So that's kind of your business case document. But then you'd also have BA questionnaires that relate to sales cloud implementation or service cloud implementation or a non-profit or email marketing, all of these sets of questions. So you can send them these questions to think about in advance. And quite often, talking about that BA preparation workshop, normally I'd have a pre-design workshop with a customer to say, right, I'm going to come and meet with you in whether it's 2 or 3 weeks time. And these are all the things that I'm going to be asking of you. When will you have that ready? And then you decide the timeline for actually delivering the workshop. And then, so by the time you got to the workshop, they do come ready and armed with their email templates and their reports and dashboard requirements and all those things, because it's a complete waste of time if you turn up to do a design workshop and they haven't got all this stuff ready in their head. That's where it eats up budget. So you want to make sure people are ready for that workshop. Then after the workshop, you need to write up all those requirements, which includes your process maps, your requirements log, your technical workbook, and you might also need to research solutions. So there's quite a lot that needs to go into that design time, and all of that has to be costed out and made sure that it's included in it. Then you've got your implementation time, so that's the build. So whether that's objects, fields, email templates, flows, that's quite often what people, are used to. Then you've got your user testing time. Now with user testing is where, if you're working in an agile methodology, you'll be kind of doing user testing every week with them and doing a show and tell. So you'll need to prepare the sandboxes, you'll need to prepare test data, you need to get a demo ready, you'll want to do user test scripts, and then you'll want to walk through it with them. And then there's going to be changes that they need, which then obviously goes back to implementation. So you need to make time for that. What would be a common misconception is when we've done the build and take it back to a client, I've then suddenly been faced quite often with them like, oh, we're ready for training now. It's like, oh my God, no, we're not ready for training. And there's people there that have never been in the workshop and don't know anything about it. We're like, no, we really have to run through the system first, because it's only going to be about 80% ready. And it's really important you don't train everybody until the system is right, because otherwise you get people will lose faith in it and think, oh, this is never going to work. And that's a problem. So then moving through to training time, again, I've talked about the gold standard training to the bronze. You're better off being in a position where you're saying to the client, look, if I was delivering a gold standard, this is everything that I would do for you. Now, based on that, they might say, great, yeah, we'll have it all. Or they might say, what, can we just stick with X, Y, Z? If you can educate them on what a gold standard looks like, you're then mitigating the responsibility if adoption doesn't happen, because what you've done is say, look, to maximize adoption, I'd really recommend we do presentation, we do some videos, we do a manual, and we do some live training. You've got that whole mix bag in there. But if they say to you, no, actually, can you just do a manual and that's all, you've taken that, you've shared that risk with them, but they've sort of then decided we're just going to do a bronze level training. And so you kind of done your piece as much as you can do. So, training time needs to be built in. You need to obviously prepare for that. You need to do the videos or the manuals or the demos, or even install an inbuilt training. You might use a third-party app and install that as well. So you need to work out what the training is going to look like. Number 9 is offboarding. So with this, you need to offboard a team or a customer properly to make sure they know how to manage their system ongoing. So that could be training, training somebody as a Salesforce administrator, making sure they're clear on those 40 tasks. setting up a support desk for them, introducing them to Salesforce Ohana, Trailhead, and any other aftercare support. And then number 10 is the project management time. Again, I've had people being a bit, I don't really want to charge for that. It's like that's part and parcel of a project. Like, you need to charge for your project management time. And you need to think about, well, what does that mean? That means client communication. It means communication with the Salesforce team if it isn't just you. It means logging things in a project management system, and recording time that you're using on the project. So as a Salesforce consultant, all our projects will be billed to time, so they would buy a certain number of hours. So it's really important that everything's logged in terms of the delivery of that. So we know when a client's hitting their budget, on that. And also documenting requirements in the system as well. So all of that effort needs to be included in the budget. So that's the sort of the project life cycle, if you like. Are there any questions around that? So Leanne, you've said, and DSDM was one style of Agile you recommend, contrasted with Scrum. So there's a difference between DSDM and Scrum. If you're managing a whole project within time and budget, which most big projects have to be, then that's where DSDM comes in. Scrum fits underneath it as a component. So say, for example, a certain amount of time and budget has already been agreed for a certain project, then you would manage the technical team in a Scrum type environment, because you're not thinking about time and budget at that point. You're just going, right, this has been agreed, this is what we're doing, and you're sort of working in a Scrum. And a Scrum is where you're doing a daily stand-up, you're talking about the technical requirements, and you're discussing the detail of the build. Whereas with DSDM, you're talking about what is it the business needs, how are we prioritizing the requirements, and what project are we going to do first, and then it goes into the Scrum level. So if you want to be in that position where you're discussing high level requirements, you're discussing a project, lots of many different projects, sorry, I've got a thing in my throat, you want to be trained in DSDM at that higher level. If you want to be somebody who's managing a Salesforce team to do some build after it's been given to you, to say, right, guys, can you build this? And you manage, as say that Salesforce team to just build something, then that's where you want to be doing Scrum. If that makes sense. Cool. Great. Let me know if there's anything else that comes up. So rattling through the next one, lots of content here. So we've done risk. We are looking at time. I'm trying to share my screen. How much you got this up? So 10 documents. So let's look at the documents piece. The 10 documents to produce on your projects. Get them with slideshow. There we go. So documentation, really, really important. If you don't like doing documentation, then you have to think about the right role that you want to be in, where you kind of avoid it, if you like, because you don't want to be in a position where there's no documentation on a Salesforce project. So I think you have to be really strict with yourself if it is your responsibility. But otherwise it's finding that role within the team where you don't have to do it. And you sort of do that. Sorry, I've just seen Samantha's question. Is it correct to say DSDM is broken into phases and Scrum sprints and how we accomplish those phases? Yes, Samantha, that's a great way of putting it. Absolutely. Good, it's a good spot. So if we talk about documentation, the key things that you should have on a project that you should be putting together is a business case. So that's a summary of why is the solution needed, what the business priorities are, the expected return on investment, and the measures of business success. As I mentioned before, you're better being in a position where you're sharing a set of indicators that could be applicable to help them really come up with it. And then you're looking at, well, how are we going to measure this? I mean, ideally, you'd want a dashboard or something that's going to help you measure that long term. Secondly, your CRM strategy. So your CRM strategy is also known as a roadmap. Your business case will fit in here, but what will happen is you'll probably have a business case to start with to even convince people as to why they need a CRM. And then what you'll have is then, if the CRM then goes ahead, the CRM strategy would then absorb that business case in it. But then you'll go into that level of, okay, let's look at our big product roadmap. what are we going to do in the first 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line. You're going to have that prioritization of the high level requirements as to why things have been done a certain way. And that's where you'd use Agile Moscow prioritization. And then you'd also have in here your risk assessment. So the CRM strategy is like the glue about, well, what is the big plan here? What are we going to do and when? So you've got that big picture. Then you've got your project management plan. So that's who are all the different stakeholders in this project. What are their roles and responsibilities? I talk about this in change management because change management is about having a change agent team, really. Everybody needs to have their written roles and responsibilities. Everybody needs to know what they're meant to be doing. You should have then obviously the tools that support that. So a project management tool. And you want to be really clear on what the project timeline is and the management strategy. So again, a lot of this you get taught as part of Agile project management and change management. Then you want your change management plan. Now, another word for change management plan is a communication plan. But with communication, it is very much being mindful about the culture of the organization, the stakeholders. I also talk a lot about I've talked about 4 different cultures. There's also 4 different types of stakeholder. Anything from blockers to sleepers to those that are champions. And again, it's just being really mindful of, how bought in are different people. How do you, mindfully communicate with people based on where they're sitting? So if you've got sleepers who basically are ignoring that this is even happening, you've got to communicate in 3 different ways. You've got to wake them up, you've got to motivate them, and you've got to think very methodically about how you're communicating. And it is very much around, like we talk about how you'd sell something. If you're selling something, people need to hear and see something 3 times in 3 different ways for it to really sink in. It's the same methodology with change management. You've got to be really aware of the different cultures, the different learning styles, the different stakeholder kind of appetite for the CRM. There's lots of different facets. So how you deliver as a Salesforce professional, you need to be really mindful about how you deliver during the business analysis process, how you deliver during the user testing, how you deliver during the training session, to make sure you are enthusing, engaging, and empowering people. And you enthuse and empower and educate and enthuse, empower, and educate people by being very mindful about your communication and how you're motivating people. And that's what change management is about, is that discipline. And I did the change management course because I was in a room. I think it was my 3rd project. It was quite a big project, actually. It was a big charity. And I was surrounded by like a lot more senior, older people than me at that point, because I was early 30s. But I had a guy that was sabotaging the workshop completely because he was really anti the CRM coming in. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to deal with somebody that's very anti it and kept, bringing everybody down in a negative way. And that's what made me sort of go, well, actually, what is it I need to be aware of here? How do I manage different types of stakeholders? Because I suppose my idealist view is that everybody's going to be really excited about it and everybody's bought in. I hadn't really thought about the people side of, sort of understanding about how to bring people on that journey with you. And so that's where change management comes in. So change management overlays business analysis and agile project management. The 3, I don't think, can cohabit without each other. It is actually impossible to just learn one of those things and to do your job properly. Change management really informs how you deliver business analysis and agile project management in an informed way to engage people in the best approach. But if you don't have agile project management, you're going to end up with loads of requirements and no ways to prioritize them. So they're just so interdependent that I can't imagine not really having, one of those 3 areas kind of covered off, really. So change management is really important to know how are we going to communicate to different stakeholders at what point throughout the project. Then you've got BA questionnaires. So as I mentioned, I call them BA scripts. They're a set of questions that you'd ask and you'd share with people, help them prepare for the design workshops, and you get them to write it up. Then you've got your requirements log, which is summarizing everything from the design workshops. That would cover both your functional and non-functional requirements, but also you'd start to document in there your technical solutions with it. And with your technical solutions, you then got a technical workbook, which I'll come on to at number 8. Now, as part of the workshops, you've got your process maps. So you'd be process mapping everything throughout the workshop. I like to do that in situ within the workshop as much as possible. And the reason for that is if people are downloading information to you and you're writing the process map up in front of them so they can see it, it helps them visualize what they've told you already, and they can see if anything's missing. And they also can feel that they can trust you to understand what they've told you because they're seeing that you're writing it. And if something isn't right, they can tell you. So you can save a bit of time there by doing the process maps in situ. And don't worry about going slow because it takes a lot of brain power writing down what their day-to-day process is. And so they'll be thinking whilst you are typing it up. So, you don't need to go fast. You don't worry, you can write it up, but it's very important that they see what you're writing rather than have it behind the scenes and they can't see. So it's very important as part of the thought process. So we talked about technical workbook. This is where you'll write all the technical work that needs doing, all the fields that need building, all the reports that need building, and then you can do, we sort of designed an estimated calculator off the back of this. So you can cost out everything that needs to be built in the technical workbook. So you do that. You might need an app comparison matrix. So if they are considering an app, like maybe a project management solution, what I would do for clients is then go away and compare different project management apps for them and deliver that back in an app comparison matrix, which would then list out all the different features. So that might be optional. Obviously, that might not be something that they require. And then number 10 is around training manuals. So you would document, when I say document, I'm not necessarily talking about it being a spreadsheet or Word document. It might be documented in a tool or system as part of it. So training resources would need to be documented, which could be written. It could be through in situ training apps. Could be through videos, there's a range of different ways that you would document training potentially as well, but things need to be logged somewhere. So that's the documentation side. Any questions around that? That all makes sense. Okay, no questions, that's good. Oh, I've got one here. No, so finally, we will look at the 5 communication tools. Let me share this one. So within communication, as I mentioned before, it's important that everybody knows what's going on and communicating. So there's 5 different communication tools that you want to have for your project. So the first tool is something that allows you to manage your time and budget. So you ideally need a project management tool to track tasks and use utilization of time and budget against a project. Again, have this internally as much, if you're working internally as a Salesforce professional, use it to track the time that you're spending on different requirements as much as you would need it as an external consultant. Number 2 is you want somewhere to log all the user requirements. That may be the same system as a project management one. It might be different. Having done a bit of a survey on this within the Salesforce ecosystem, and certainly from my own experience as well, there isn't like the tool that does everything. So quite often user requirements will get logged in a different system. It could be, you could be documenting them in a spreadsheet, or you could use a system like Jira. You've kind of again got your bronze, your gold standard, and it really depends on the budget and, the size of the organization. So you want somewhere to log all your functional and non-functional requirements, and so you can see what's happening. And ideally, you can engage with the team, that you sort of your client stakeholders around these requirements. So if you're needing more information, you can ask them, and it's all kind of done within that system. So that's where people have integrated things like Slack or Converse. So if you're using Jira, there's a integrated sort of conversation tool with that. So say if you were using Jira, you logged a requirement, but with that requirement, you needed more information. So say it was an email template, but you needed the email template, you can converse around that requirement with the stakeholders. And so everything's sort of kept together. Whereas other people use Slack, and it's sort of there. So it's better than emails. because obviously emails doesn't link anything, it's back and forth, it's in nobody's agenda. Whereas if you've got a project management system with all the user requirements and everything that you're doing and conversations around requirements, it's all kept together. So really important. Then you need a shared filing solution where, again, a client or team will be passing you lots of information. So that could be reports, it could be data, it could be email templates. And you don't want that going back and forth on emails, really. Again, you want somewhere where they can upload it to a shared filing system, and then you can just access it as you need. Particularly important if they're sharing any client data with you, which needs to be imported. You want ideally for it to be on their folder, and then they give you access to their folder, because you don't want to be holding their client information on any of your folders. And that's particularly important for data protection right now. And then number 5 is having a process mapping software tool to map. Ideally, again, if you are creating process maps for an organization, you want to be able to share those process maps with the end stakeholders, and they then can continue to iterate them and develop them beyond your involvement, particularly if you're a consultant and you're walking out, because process maps, I think, are an integral part of a training manual. And so if you're creating process maps at the beginning that then become part of the training to say, right, this is now how you work in your job, if then things start to evolve and change, you want them to be able to feel empowered to then evolve those process maps and not have to draw them all out from scratch. So if you can use a process mapping software tool that they can access and, let's say, own their process maps long term, that's your best sort of situation to be in, really. So that ends with those kind of key aspects on that. Any questions around those? Okay, so I'm just going to do a little poll to see what you're thinking now. So which of your areas do you think you want to focus on most at the moment? Which are the areas that you feel weakest on, if you like? So I've got here business analysis, change management, and agile project management. You can pick more than one actually here, I think. It's multiple choice. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. There is quite a lot to take in there. Quick fire range. You find all this on YouTube as well. So it's on our YouTube channel if you want a little replay of it, of these key sessions. But there's a lot we cover in our consultancy skills course. So we go into business analysis, change management, agile project management in a lot more detail. There's on-demand videos that I've created around each of these topics. Over the 12 weeks, there's about 2 hours of video content you can watch each week around covering all these areas, as well as offboarding, onboarding, all the business analysis scripts as well. So we cover business analysis scripts for Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, Nonprofit Cloud, email marketing, contact management. And so I just really like equipping people with, say, all the tools and templates that they can do and get cracking with straight away, so they don't make all the rookie mistakes that everybody else makes because they don't know what they're doing. I think it's also really empowering to walk into an interview and go, right, if somebody said to you, what would be the first thing that you do in this job? Say, well, I do this health check and I've got this template and these are the questions that I'd be asking. And they're like, oh, wow, okay, this is amazing. So I love giving people the formulas and the templates and tools to really know what it is that they've got to do, whether they're going for a job interview and they can share it at that stage, or whether they're walking into a job as a solo admin and going, okay, I've got to manage all these stakeholders and know what I'm doing. This is where we're kind of, these are things that you kind of want to have at your fingertips so you feel confident that you know what you've got to do, and you can upward manage people. Very importantly, I think sometimes some Salesforce administrators can sort of feel out of their depth and that people aren't taking them seriously, whereas actually you need to educate people about what you need or want for them, like the exec sponsors. And so if you've got all the tools and templates and you can share that level of authority with them, then they'll obviously fall into a line a little bit better on those things. So thank you for choosing. What have we got here? So I think it's even across the board, actually. So 5 on business analysis, 5 on change management, and 5 on agile. Jacqueline, yes, we've got a question. Oh, so Samantha, you said, what is an object entity diagram? So an object entity, object entity diagram is where it shows all the different objects that you're building in the Salesforce system. So that's typically always something you'd produce at the end of a project, and they're all linked together in a certain way on that. So I'm just going to wrap up on the final slides. Where are we? Which one I want to do this to share first. So just to wrap up on the course, if any of you are interested in coming on the course, it starts next Tuesday, the live course. And so I'm going to whip through this. I've talked through a lot of this content, but a lot of people take the course because they want to increase their salary. So if you're adopting these skills, you can normally negotiate at least another 10k on your salary, because it takes you to that higher level. So as a consultant with these consultancy skills, you're jumping from maybe a 30k to 46k or 94 to 127 typically. So people with agile, project management and BA skills finish. So you will get a certification off the back of this course, but also it will equip you to get your business analysis certification with Salesforce as well. So you'll have a certification in consultancy skills. So the investment is obviously a good ROI if you're trying to negotiate another 10k onto your salary. So the essential areas that we cover, which are all the areas that you guys are sort of saying you're looking to develop, is we cover the business analysis skills, the change management skills, and the agile project management aspects, which are all the things that we've been talking about today. And we also do a module on DevOps as well, so you know how to manage changes throughout the process. If you learn all these skills, you will avoid all those problems that we talked about, in that, things are gathered properly and that there's clear, consistent documentation, and you will avoid failure at the end of the day. I've been through all the pain points, and if you can avoid them as much as possible, that's the best place to be. So, if you are in a position where you have no structure, no documentation, no process, no solution, or what it will result in is that you'll get poor engagements, poor understanding, poor adoption. They're typically what you see. Whereas if you skill up in these areas, what you're going to be in a position of is that you've got a very clear structure about how to work. You can hit the ground running. You'll have that clear documentation in place, and you'll have a really clear process about what you need to go through. And if you're starting a job for the first time, off you go. You've kind of got everything in place. And if you get all of those things sorted, then you're going to have much better engagement and higher adoption rates with those projects. And that's your trailblazer story. That's making people happy as part of a project is the biggest, most enjoyment of doing this job well, which is why I invested like 11 grand in doing all these courses myself, because I was like, oh my god, I don't want to, I feel like a cowboy, like I don't really know what I'm doing. And so, I invested all this money, which I don't regret for a second. It set me up for success in sort of putting everything into place. And I've talked through, obviously my background and experience of running it. So on the course, we cover all those different aspects on it. And we also provide a whole pack of BA scripts. So we give you BA scripts for CRM strategy, health check, sales cloud, service cloud, community cloud, or Experience Cloud as it's now called, payment integration, events management, e-marketing, grant management, impact management, and also non-functional requirements. So you get literally all the questions you would ask and make sure that you cover with a client, because again, if something gets missed off here, quite often the project will go wrong. Now, alongside this, you have 12 live webinar sessions with me, and this is where we cover topics such as the onboarding process, non-functional requirements. We do a deep dive into Agile in more detail. We talk about the gold standard training strategy. We talk about how to do a health check. And we also go into detail around the Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, and the BA questionnaires in more detail. So I give you an overview of those products, what they encompass, and then questions you would ask, but also the technical considerations and what you need to think about when you're doing those projects. And I also cover contact management, because actually that isn't a cloud in its own right, because contact is like the staple object of any system, but actually there's some very important questions you need to ask about how contact management is managed, because it's the anchor object of the whole system. And so it's a cross-departmental workshop that you would run, and it's very important one. And then we talk about project toolbox, what are the tools and systems you need to have in your toolbox to be successful. And then we talk about the offboarding process. So within these, we have breakout sessions, we have discussions, everybody gets to know each other, along the way. And so we have a lovely cohort where they've even got jobs with each other, they've gone to work at similar companies, and support each other on their journey on the 12-week course. So in addition to that, you also get access to our career coaching, fortnightly group career coaching sessions, plus also you get a one-to-one 1-hour coaching session with me. So we can help you with resume, interview prep and job opportunities. And we do also have our recruitment agency that can help you apply and be presented for job opportunities as well. So we do offer a lot of follow-on support. So as a sum up, it's 12 weeks, it's 4 to 8 hours of study a week. You can just get away with doing 4 if there's optional study for the 8 hours if you want to do optional trailheads. We have a live session of 1 hour a week. And then you've got the fortnightly coaching if you want those, and also a one-to-one. And then you've got that peer support of alumni as well as we go through it. So we've had lovely feedback. I really do love seeing like where everybody's got to in it. So we've had various testimonials. People love like the order, the structure, the templates and the checklists. I'm a big one for checklists, as you can see. Whereas this lady said, I felt very much more confident, for example, describing the agile project management methodology and catering for different learning styles. So different people have really got different things from it. Whereas somebody else said, I wish I'd knew all this while starting out as a solo admin. So I would really recommend it for anybody who's going to work as a solo admin, because you need all those hacks in place really as a solo administrator. And then this lady said, I've really enjoyed the consultancy skills course. It's given me the confidence to deliver with a clear implementation process for projects with tools and techniques. So it's just really about equipping you, because if you're in a position where you're in a job and you're going, you've just been very reactive to stuff and you don't really know what you're doing, which is where I was, all of this is just going to help you go, right, what is the process I'm going to take? How am I going to work through it? And these skills are really essential of it. So the cost of the course is 1,200 in sterling and 1,600 USA dollars. So we do give you a 50% certification voucher as part of it. You do get a certification on completion, so you can put that on your CV. And also you do get focus on force membership with it as well. So all the content I'm sharing with you, a lot of, it's bespoke, but a lot of it I pulled from the training that I did, the official training I did, where I spent over £11,000 on the training. So I'm sharing a lot of this content with you in a much more considered way that is aligned to a Salesforce project. And so it's there for you to pick up and go with, as opposed to, what I was faced with of going, oh my God, there's so much information from all these courses that, how do I absorb that? So it's much more plug and play ready, really, and obviously a lot more bespoke templates, which you don't, I've created through my experience and everything on that as well. So let me know if you've got any questions on the course. You can book in a call with our team. Again, I'll put that in the email that goes out tomorrow. So our team, we have Maria and Diane, who are happy to talk through what the course can offer, any questions you have, and hopefully we can support you. As I say, we get started next Tuesday. Our first live call is next Tuesday. If you can't make live calls, they are also recorded. So they are there for you to watch in your own time. So we've had people that join that just do it all on demand in their own time because they're working during the day. So, it's very flexible. But the main thing is we want you to get you to that place where you can enthuse, engage and empower people, and that you have that clear structure, documentation and process. So I hope that's given you lots of great value. today. And if you want to do the course, then obviously we want you to feel empowered with the confidence, skills and knowledge to understand, you know, how to implement different systems as part of that as well. So happy to answer any more questions now, or we can wrap up for the evening. But thank you very much for joining. I hope you've enjoyed it. Any questions before we wrap up? Thanks, Elizabeth. Glad you've enjoyed it. Samantha, you said, is exam cert prep part of the course? So we talk about, we don't do specific exam prep cert. So we talk about, you know, what the products are and what questions you'd ask as a BA. And some of those will overlap with what you'll need for the certification specifically. So, you know, we used to have in there, we do have in there all the trailhead modules for Sales Cloud and Service Cloud as the optional trailhead. So you can certainly crack on with some of that stuff as part of the course as well. On that, we do run separate peer study group sessions as well, which we run as free resources. So we're just getting another series of those put together. Cool. Thank you, Samantha. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Brilliant. Any other questions before we wrap up? Great. Thanks, Alina. Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining. As I say, do reach out to us. Hopefully I'll get to work with some of you. We've got 15 on the course already for next week, so I'm really excited. And I can't wait to start it. It's my favorite time of the week, but I try not to say that to my staff that much. But no, I really do enjoy working with everybody and teaching this content and sharing all my war-torn stories as well. So lovely to have you all here. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever you are. I hope to speak to you soon. Bye.